3, 2. Hi, this is Paul Casey, the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame educational video series where we discuss Kempo, related martial arts, theories and principle, and we have very special guests. Today, we are honored to have with us Grandmaster Bob Wall. Bob Wall is an amazing individual. Not only is he well known for his martial arts contributions, he's also a teacher. He's been involved in the martial arts in many ways, as I will say right then, as a champion. He is also an author, an actor, and an incredibly successful businessman. His practices are adhered to and taught to many people that are successful in business. Mr. Wall, I'm going to call you Bob for the rest of our interview. It is truly an honor to have you here today, sir. How are you?
Well, I can tell you one thing, B.O.B. is way better than B.O.O.B.
Yeah. Well, we worked at the Palomino Club together, so I don't know. We saw that too.
My secret is that I've had my butt kicked by the fabulous mother, Reva, and I'm 900-0 against my wife, Lillian, of 52 years, one marriage, one woman. And so I basically am a product of the great women that have fomented this country. Anyway, pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. You know, sometimes I know that the warrior in you is what leads you, drives you, inspires you through all you do. And you use your life experiences, your family to guide you on certain paths. Let's talk about the mindset of a champion. This part of the educational video series deals with people like yourself that have blazoned the path for today's martial artist. You have shown us the journey that we should pursue, but you give us the option through your efforts, your experience, your work. All right. Tell us a little bit, how has the art changed in your mind from when you started?
Well, you know, I think all of us come to it with different motivations, but most of it is based on insecurity and maybe, you know, people beating you up or putting you down or creating insecurities in you. And that was certainly true in my sake. I had the greatest mother and the worst father. My father was an alkie, and he stuck, you know, which unfortunately I still have the scars to prove it, stuck hay hooks in my arm, stabbed me through the hand with a screwdriver, left me on a post for an hour and a half, hit me in the face with a hammer, and I almost died when I was 12. So at 13, I left. I knew I was going to kill him or he was going to kill me. And I preferred the latter. And, but in any event, I rode 168 miles, moved in with an uncle. He had a big car lot in San Jose, 546 Keys and 11th. And I got a job washing cars, and I put myself through high school. And my uncle was way better than my father, of course, but he was also an alkie. I'm Irish. And so, you know, all the brothers and uncles were alkies to a degree. But this particular Uncle John was very smart and very wealthy. And so he inspired me because he owned a bunch of used car lots, and he owned, you know, Army Navy surplus stores and 17 homes on the beach in Santa Cruz. And then we're talking way back 52, 53, 54. So he inspired me, and he was never particularly kind, but he was never mean either. But I got a job washing cars, pretty soon became a mechanic, pretty soon became an old 46 Merc that had blown engine transmission and took it as a trade-in. And it took me a year, but I rebuilt the engine and rebuilt the transmission and all that stuff. Anyway, I became a mechanic, and I started racing cars. And I started with D-gas and then went to C-gas, and then bought a 56 Corvette and didn't do well with that. But then 57, I bought a 57 fuel-injected Corvette, which I still own. And I set the world's fastest Corvette, 112 miles, 1290. Anybody can look it up. And I set the world's record for years. But I was 5 feet tall and 93 pounds, so very insecure. And it was a time of weaklings were 98 pounds. So I was 5 pounds lighter than the weakling. And so I started wrestling, and I went 2 years getting my butt kicked, and in 2 years going undefeated, got a scholarship to San Jose State. Then I go to judo. I'm a cocky guy. I'm undefeated 2 years now. I get my butt kicked for about 1.5 years in judo, which I thought was Jewish do. Like, going, what the heck is judo? Until I got my first flying lessons. And then saw the great Gene LeBell win the 54-55 nationals. And so I moved to LA to train with him. But I was by then 130 pounds. And I knew he fought at 165 pounds, hard to believe. But I got up to 165 pounds, moved to LA, eating a lot of crummy protein and so forth. But I got there, I walk in the door, he's 265. And I go, what? I'll never be 265. And he proceeded, kid, I got 2 gears, kind of kill. And I went, oh, I think I like that. Until he started beating the shit out of me. So my record has basically got the shit kicked out of me in wrestling for 2 years, went undefeated for 2 years, got the shit kicked out of me in judo for 1.5 years. And then I won a few. And in those days, you didn't do tests. You were a white belt, you went into competition, you had to beat 2 green belts. They didn't want to be beat by a white belt. And as a green belt, you had to beat 2 brown belts. They didn't want to be beat by green belts. And then as a brown belt, you had to beat 2 black belts. So I learned early on that winning and overcoming your fear of fighting somebody who in theory is superior to you was really a great advantage for me. And then I got to Gene LeBell, and of course, he beat the hell out of me for over 50 years. I never even come close to beating him, but I tried. But then he said, train in everything. Train in everybody's got something. So I trained in everything. You know, my first was boxing. And that was pretty good till I got the shit knocked out of me. I said, oh, they actually hit you. Oh, that's something that karate didn't have in those days. And so judo for me was way tougher than karate in the beginning days. And then I studied Thai boxing. I studied jujitsu for many, many years and ranked up in jujitsu, trained with the Machados and the Gracies. And then I studied everything I could find from Thai boxing, Kempo, you name it. I trained with anybody who was good. And so Gene LeBell was a very wise man, the world's toughest man. Started MMA. Nobody has ever beat him. Wrestled a bear. I can show you, I can grab a picture of him wrestling a bear and defeating the bear. And the bear is not muzzled and no gloves. And he shreds Gene. But Gene's like me. We're psychos. You got to kill us to stop us. And so thanks to Gene LeBell, the great, I trained with everybody and everything. And I became Joe Lewis's first black belt. He studied Shorin Ryu. But I took him, as I always did, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, everybody. I took him to Gene LeBell and I let him stretch him. So they find out there's a world out there you don't know, guys. You may be really good at punching and kicking. But anyway, that was really my education, was showing that martial arts, every martial arts, Kempo, Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, Shotokan, Taekwondo, everything has, as Gene LeBell said, everybody has something good, but everybody has something weak. So study them all, figure their weaknesses out, and that's how I became a world professional karate champion. Along with, I'm looking at the poster, Joe Louis, Chuck Norris, Mike Stone, Skipper Mullins, and me. We were the first world professional champions. And by the way, 1969, it was low kicks, full contact, break their legs, break their ribs, which a lot of people got hurt, but you couldn't hit the face, no safety equipment. But on that card a year later in 1970, Joe Louis did the first glove knockout, and he was my first partner. And Joe was one tough guy. So having been around all these greats, I brought Bruce Lee and all my other friends in to train with Pat Burleson and Jim Harrison and Gene LeBell and everybody that I trained with was tough in their own way. So my success is based on having my butt kicked. And that's why then I met Frank Trejo, who I loved, one tough guy, Tom Kelly, another tough guy, Ed Parker, another tough guy. And because I trained in everything, I got to meet the tough guys in every system. And that gave me the core, which you, as you well know, you've alluded to it. The real key in martial arts is respect. If you got to put somebody else down to feel good, now, of course, there are bad guys, ISIS. These are pathetic assholes, and we should arrange for a meeting with the Lord with them. But normal people, normal, tough people, no matter the style, And I loved Ed Parker and Frank Trejo and Tom Kelly and all those guys. There were so many good men, but as I went through it, I learned that most people, great martial artists, sometimes don't focus on financial security, or they don't focus on kindness. And so those were my lessons. So I got Chuck Norris, partners and friends for 58 years, very kind. Mike Stone, very tough, but very kind. And all the rest of them. The ones that I favored were Joe Louis, Chuck Norris, Mike Stone, Skipper Mullins, Ed Parker, Frank Trejo, and a litany of others, Pat Burleson, Jim Harrison, we just lost. But they're all tough, but kind. And so I ran the Whiskey Go-Go for a couple of years. And so I had the greatest sex life of anybody, even Elvis. And I rose up to where I was the highest paid instructor in the world. I taught Elvis, Jack Palance, Brian Keith, Paul Newman, Edgar Summers, Steve McQueen, Freddie, and on and on and on, because I knew how to make money. I'm a money machine. Left home with $3, by 25, I'm worth $2 million. And so I've made a lot of money my whole life. And that was my sad for me. Not as sad as a father losing a child. That's the worst for me. But I found out good people, and my blessing was I had the greatest mother in the world, Reva Wingo Wall. She sat me down at 7 and did something to me that every parent should do to every child before they go to meet their maker. She said, Bobby, I want you to hate everybody. I said, Mommy, I don't want to hate everybody. Yep, you got to hate everybody that chose their parents. I looked at her, I said, well, Mommy, that's not possible. That's right, son. So it doesn't matter if you're brown or black or yellow or red or white or green or purple. Never judge a person by their color, because nobody chose their parents. So whatever we are, my kids are like you, Italian and Irish. I'm Irish. But I fell out with the Catholic religion as a parent because they allowed their priests to molest people and move from parish to parish. So we got married in 1968, my wife and I, and the greatest wife in the world, Lillian. But I said, I'll go to church twice a year, but I don't respect the Catholic religion because it's fabulous. It's one of the great religions, and it's sickening to me. But to allow priests to move from parish to parish after being accused of multiple sexual assaults, for me, I protected my kids, and I knew I would kill somebody who molested my children. I would happily serve the rest of my life in prison. I'm not going to let somebody molest my children. So I was a little bit of a paranoid parent. My kids never got molested, so fortunately I didn't have to kill anybody. But I did that in the Army. I was a sniper, and I had to pop a lot of people. And it was hard for me being a Christian. But after 3 or 4, I finally realized, as it is today, bad people need to be sent back to the Lord for recycling. They didn't have that word. I got out of the Army in July of 67, but didn't have that word. So I got over it by forgiving the bad people, because I sent them to be retrained by the Lord. And then many years later, they came up with recycling. I said, oh my God, I wish I had that word back then. But here was the real success of my life. Left home at 13, greatest mother, worst father, Alki, abused me. And I hated him until I was 30. And then I started thinking about what my mom had said. And I lost her a few years ago at 99, but the greatest woman. And I married another great woman, my wife. One wife, 52 years. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. So my lesson was back to what my mom said. And she said, don't even judge people by what they say, because we all say stupid stuff. Judge them by what they do. And so there's the problem with our politics and the unfortunate, hatred that exists out there. I don't let it bother me. So I was shaving at 30, and I said, and I hated my dad from 13 to 30. And one day I was shaving. I said, you know what? And this is the lesson for everyone. Anything that makes you upset, anything that creates hatred, anything that creates negativity and insecurity that most people cure by drugs and then lose their lives, Freddie, Prinze, dead at 22, Bruce Lee, dead at 32, Steve McQueen, dead at 50, and Elvis dead at 42. All famous, all smart, all talented, all handsome, but drugs in the end became their demise in some way, shape, or form, whether legitimate or illegal. So I've never done a drug. My wife thinks I'm a weirdo because I've never taken an aspirin. I never smoked marijuana. I did anything. I deal with pain. And I learned from my life of getting my butt kicked hundreds of times in everything martial arts I studied. Key, respect. B, don't do drugs. C, do not take pain medication. Deal with it, God damn it. There's a reason why you hurt. Fix the pain without anesthetizing it, because then you're going to treat yourself to a lifetime of drug abuse. So I've never done any drug. And I got high on martial arts, respect, and good people. And I stay away from it like weeds. I stay with good people like yourself. So that's been my history.
Thank you for sharing it. That's rather a personal insight that generally most people are very fearful to reveal because it may expose them in their mind that they are weak, where actually there's great strength from that through personal experience. And
well,
so
everybody is born weak. We're all babies. And can you name one baby that was born and said, I don't like black people, brown people, red people, yellow people, white people, green people? No, that's taught.
Well, if we go back to your spirituality in the Catholic faith, forget the Catholics. But if you look at Jesus Christ, there's one individual that loved everybody. And that was one of the greatest lessons one can take from his life, even if you don't believe in him being divine intervention, he being the great spiritual leader to a different world. My daughter was pure love. She knew pain her whole life, but she focused more on love. And love is the key element that we all can give to one another, and it will make better our lives. You had your first one of your first instructors after you started off in judo, correct?
I started wrestling and then I went to judo.
Okay, so you're a wrestler and
then I went to Gene LeBell and I became
judo.
his fifth black belt.
Right, so you went from there. What were the lessons you learned in that kind of hand-to-hand combat in a sporting event?
There's a million ways, literally, to beat somebody. And the key is if you understand chess or checkers or judo or jiu-jitsu or karate or kickboxing, whatever, if you know somebody is a black belt in judo, then you already know how to beat them. If you know somebody is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you already know how to beat them. If they're a Thai boxer, which I am a big fan of, American boxing, which I'm a big fan of, all the martial arts. The point is, every martial arts has strength. Every martial art has weaknesses. It doesn't matter if it's Kempo or Taekwondo or whatever it is. They have strengths and weaknesses. So the secret is to study it, train in it, learn the strengths, learn the weaknesses. And Chuck Norris and I always said when we trained with everybody, we said, all right, let them kick our ass. Don't show them what we know. Just go home with what they know. And that wasn't mean, but most people are egotistical. And we weren't. One of the things I admire about Chuck Norris is never egotistical. Gene LeBell, never egotistical. Gene LeBell is by far the toughest man on earth. Never been defeated. Created MMA, 1963. He put out a professional boxer named Milo Savage, and anybody can go on the internet and see it. But he's never once in all the years I've known him, way over 60 years, that he's never said, I beat up so-and-so. In fact, when he choked out Steven Seagal twice, all the stuntmen were calling that had watched him. And then I called him and I said, so I hear you choked out old Steven. And he said, he's a fine actor and an excellent martial artist. Well, that's typical Gene LeBell. He never says I kicked anybody's ass, but go play with him now at 88. And he's at a studio that I sold one of our fellow black belts, Gokar Chivishian, and he's on Atoll in North Hollywood. And you can go over there every Monday night and challenge Gene LeBell. If you think you're tough, you'll find out you're not. Because you'll find out, like Steven Seagal.
Does he drink coffee?
Steven Seagal, he said, when I finally got him to talk, and he said, well, I gave him yellow underwear in the front and brown in the back, so he knew which way to put them on. And Steven Seagal is a punk. He's a phony, fat punk who doesn't appreciate he's tall, 6'4", big guy. You know, when I punked him out, he was about 300 pounds. Now I guess he's 450. But here's a guy that was given the gift of size. You get more respect when you're tall than you do when you're short, which is unfortunate. So maybe short people have to earn more respect. But I stood on his foot, I jammed my foot in his face, and I said, you start, I'll finish. I'll rip your head off and shit in your neck, you punk, fat punk. And he cried like a little bitch. But there is a perfect example. He's given size, he's given fame, he's given money, but he's just not a good guy. He has no respect, zero. And I respected him before I knew him because he gave Aikido a name, which was pretty much the silent, which is a fabulous martial arts, you know, and Morhei and everybody that famous and developed Aikido. It's a fabulous martial art. He gave it respect, but then he gave it disrespect. And by talking trash about Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee and everybody else, nobody is worth a damn except him. But when I stood on his little footy and jammed my 6-foot forehead into his face, he cried like a little weasel that he is. He's a weasel. So those are the people I don't like. The people I love are Gene LeBell and Chuck Norris and Mike Stone and Joe Louis, past, Jim Harrison, past. But my lesson has been train with the best, give respect, understand it. What's our thing? We bow when we get on the mat. We bow when we start a fight. We bow afterwards, win, lose, or draw. And we learn humility and respect because there's always somebody that can kick your butt. But, you know, I have an advantage, having been a sniper, you know, and I had to arrange a lot of meebles with people for the Lord. And I probably had more street fights than anybody I know. Never lost one. But why? Not that I'm so tough, but my attitude is one key word, conation. Conation means show me to stop me. And everybody like yourself that's achieved a black belt from somebody like Trejo, who was one of the great ones, you have conation. And so conation makes you not somebody you want to try to beat up because you're going to wind up getting hurt, sure. You know. So that was my secret, you know, the conation thing. But also having trained with people and knowing people like Ed Parker and Bruce Lee, whom I love, and Chuck Norris and Mike Stone and Jim Harrison, Pat Burleson, and on and on and on and on and on. My blessing has been that I got to train with them. They all kicked my ass. And so that gives you a little humility lesson. And then to get to be a world champion, you know, the first world professional team champions with the great Joe Louis, Mike Stone, Chuck Norris, Skipper Mullins, and me. And 2 of those 5 are gone now. That humiliates, humbles you. It gets back to your losing your daughter. I mean, I pray for her right now. I have kids, and I would just be the worst experience on earth to lose a child. So thank God you have a son. But respect, that's the key. And remaining humble. Mm-hmm. Nobody is the toughest person on earth because the toughest person has a rifle and they're 200 miles away from you or 200 feet and they have scope and they shoot you. So you've got to be humble. And the one thing you learn, you may be tough, but you're not invincible. So just be kind. And to that note, that's why 2 of my heroes are Gandhi, talk about love and peace, and Martin Luther King, because they learned that violence was not the answer. Love is the answer. And so when I got married 52 years ago, I said, I'm going to be the best husband. I've done that. No cheating, no lying. I'm going to be the best father. And all my kids will tell you, I worked hard at being the best father. And so it's character. And my mom used to tell me, the only thing in the world that's perfect you sit on, it's called an asshole. And I've never met anybody who said, I want to be a perfect asshole. So nobody can be perfect, but be of good character. She said, it doesn't matter what matters. Reputation is what people think you are, but character is what you really are. Son, just be of good character. That's what I taught my kids. And that's what I try to be, of good character.
Let me say this. Mr. Parker has a quote. I like to go to quotes sometimes because it's a good reference. And our discussion here is on the mindset of a champion. And so we're looking at you as an influence and an inspiration to be the best we can. Because I got a feeling that's the path we're traveling. Parker said simply, often to become a champion, you must believe in yourself when no one else will.
He was
That
right.
sounds true to Bob Wall. Bob Wall
Yeah,
has always had a challenge, no matter what, as a young boy, with an abusive father, with the disadvantages of growing up in an extended family when, you know, most children are fortunate, some aren't, to have their mother and father there, but you had a wonderful, loving mother. And then you've always had to fight for what you've had to do, in a sense, prove yourself. You earlier said smaller men might have to, fight for it more. I think it is that they work harder for it because they feel disadvantaged. And it all goes to the mind, no matter what. If you're a woman or you're a man, if you're big, you're small, in your mind, you only have your own perception of where you're going with this. And I think that's important. In your early training, there's a quote here that you trained in Okinawan martial arts under Gordon Doversola, correct?
Yes.
Tell us about that. I really want the people that are listening to this conversation just to think they see Bob Wall, the world champion, the famous movie action martial arts, the successful. They didn't realize that like a building, the foundation is being established here, and you're being guided by these people. So tell us about your early days with Gordon.
Well, I admired Gordon Doversolo, and I met him, and I used to go way up Silver Lake to train with him. But much as I love Gordon, we ate a lot of. He was Hawaiian, tough guy, really good martial artist, but not a great instructor. And he taught me a lot of things.
Why is that, Bob? Why was he not a great
taught me a lot
instructor?
of katas, that didn't work. And he did more of his training off the mat than on the mat. And I really loved him and adored him and admired him. And I became his black belt. Then Joe Louis comes in one day in about 1965, just out of the Marine Corps, and we're sparring. I got my girlfriend then, my wife now, Lillian, and Joe grabbed my gi and jammed me with a sidekick and broke 4 ribs. And all they could do in those days is just tape me up. Well, the next day it took me 30, 40 minutes to roll out of bed. I was in such agony. So I went back that night, sparred with Joe, and broke his nose. And he said, "What's that about?" I said, "Hey, Joe, you're better than me, but anytime you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. I'm going to try to kill your ass. So think about that the next time you try to hurt me."
What's the best lesson you got from Joe Louis?
Say what?
What was the best lesson that you learned from Joe Louis?
Well, Joe really created me. Gene LeBell had created me as a tough guy. I can grapple with anybody, but on the ground. But Joe gave me the stand-up. He was a real basic, with the Shorin Ryu. I became his first black belt in 1965. He had a great back knuckle, reverse punch, big guy. When I met him, he was 235, dropped down to 210 fighting weight. But he did a front leg sweep, a front kick, and side kick. And his side kick was this big deal. So we literally did 1,000 side kicks a day. But Shorin Ryu taught him, and then he taught me to slide your back foot in back of your back leg. And then 1, 2, 3. You stepped, picked your knee up, and threw the kick. And so we did that literally 1,000 times a day. But then every once in a while we would kick each other in the groin. And so we figured out, well, if you're stepping back behind with your back leg, you're exposing your groin. So then we switched it to stepping in front, which then covers your groin. And then 1,000 kicks a day, 1,000 kicks a day, 1,000 kicks a day for a couple of years. One day we were sitting just talking, and he was very smart. He was kind of like Chuck Norris. He was kind of introverted, if you will. But when you knew him long enough as I do, and I had to move into my apartment, and I had a 2-bedroom apartment, so I gave him an apartment. I bought him a car. He had no money. And I gave him half of my Sherman Oaks Karate School, which I set it up with my wife. He had no money, and I gave him half the school. So, but I wanted to train with him. I saw in him what I saw in Gene LeBell. These are real serious, outstanding martial artists. And so we were training 1,000 side kicks a day. And I thought this was ho-hum. But he broke so many bags, I had to take a 55-pound bag and stick it inside. And I had our bag company make a 110-pound bag with red leather. And so neither one of us could break that bag, but we'd swing it into our stomachs from every angle. We'd side kick it. And Bruce Lee would come in, and I met Bruce a year or two earlier. And so Bruce came to train with us, and Joe was real quiet and shy. And so we called the red bag, 110-pound bag, Joe Lewis's bag. And so Bruce started teasing him. He found out he didn't respond. So he called it the girl's bag. And nobody would even, you kick it once, it was like a tie bog bag, which I have in my backyard, where I trained on a lot of it. But anyway, he would tease Joe, and Joe didn't know how to react. So it's like a lot of people's comeback. It would come back the next day, and then Bruce would be there to harass him again, calling it the girl's bag. So I decided, as a joke, I made a 300-pound bag. I took a whole bunch of the bags that Joe and I had broken, and I put them inside of this huge bag, and then I had a bunch of my students hold it, and I got a ladder and jumped up, and I stomped a bunch of rubber in it, and I made this ridiculous 300-pound bag. So then I called Bruce. He was living in Bel Air at the time, real close friend. I loved him. And he comes down with his little Porsche, and so it was only Joe and I in the school. So I said, Joe, hi, Bruce is here. So then I pretended like I was on the phone. I said, oh, we got you a gift. It's red. Go out there, and it's yours. And we had it hung up. So Bruce goes out, kicks it, and falls down. Then he looked around, and Joe and I jumped out laughing our ass off. Well, Bruce didn't like to be embarrassed, right? So then he blasted it. But he learned, kicking a 300-pounder is a lot different than kicking a 100 or 200-pounder. And so anyway, Joe and I grabbed it. We took it out and put it in the Porsche, which of course covered it. He couldn't open the doors. He couldn't drive or anything. And we ran back in the school. And Bruce says, hey, I can't drive with that bag in there. Oh, okay. We picked it up, took it on my El Camino, drove it up to his house. We get there, we hang it in the garage. And then Bruce now knows he's already been embarrassed once. He doesn't want to be embarrassed again. And he could hit like a mule. So now he kicks this bag, and it caves the ceiling in. And Linda, his wife, runs out and looks up, and she sees skylight in the garage. She says, what? So Joe and I jumped in the car and raced away, being the chickens that we were. So we didn't want, we messed with Bruce Lee, but not with Linda. So she was a great wife. And I
Let me
love
ask you this. So it seems to me, what you're explaining is that Lewis was basically focusing only on combat.
Yeah, we was focused on fighting strictly,
Yeah, strictly fighting.
But back to the point, what we learned was, don't step behind as you step forward, because it exposes your groin. Step in front, that protects your groin. But then there was the big revelation, how he and I broke so many, I think Joe Lewis and I broke more ribs and ruptured more spleens, and we really effed people up. Because after 1,000 kicks a day, we learned that you must pick up your knee and your foot and your heel, and they must be level as high as you can get it. And then you got to pull them in. And therefore, that was the creation of the 1-inch punch or the 1-inch kick. You can't stop it. If your knee, your heel, and your foot are level, most people in those days swung their kicks up. And it's easy if I'm swinging a kick up for you to block it down. So it's just physics. And so by us getting it up high, then we learned to throw the same thing in a spinning back kick. Very few people have a good spinning back kick. And most of them, if properly taught, when you throw a spinning back kick, you throw a jab or a back knuckle with the intention to take the person's head off, not just flipping it. I'm going in there, when I throw my back knuckle or my jab, I want to take your head off. I want your head to roll across the street, okay? And so you throw it seriously, the choice is block or have your head knocked off. And then you spin from having thrown your jab or your back knuckle, and you put your hands up so you're protecting your face, and you pull your elbows and you leave your feet on the ground until you can spin and see the person. Now with your knee and your foot and your hip level, when you throw it, you don't miss. Very few people, even today, you don't see spinning back kicks much in MMA or anyplace else because they don't know the technique. They don't understand that sometimes old people way back know something you don't know. And so we ruptured a lot of spleens, broke a lot of ribs. You couldn't stop it. Okay. And the key, when you throw your back knuckle or your jab, intend to take the person's face off, kill them, knock their head off. And then when you spin, leave your foot, both of your feet on the ground until you see the person, then throw it. Bam! It comes straight in. And I mean, I've broken so many ribs and busted so many bags, and I don't see people today doing it. I don't see MMA guys doing it properly. So,
well, here's it. You know, it's funny that you say that.
Training, 1,000 kicks a day, training, studying, and you figure it out.
Well, it comes from your proper training because you have the right instructor or core partner to work it out. You know, there's a famous quote, and that's why I'm going back to this all the time. The true warriors of the past. You're of an era where it was blood and guts, bare knuckles. It was the real deal. Today, it's watered down a lot because of liability. Attorneys, they sue people because it's supposed to be a game, but when you have any physical contact, but they're at a quote out of something from Sun Tzu. He said that the good fighters of the old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat and then waited for the opportunity to defeat the enemy. So what you're basically saying, you practice that technique so that when that deception came about, you could execute it and there was no response that the opponent could ever put up to stop you.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And that's with all the great ones. And the other thing was that Chuck Norris and Joe Louis and I, Jim Harrison, Pat Burleson, we all went and trained with everybody. We trained with Seo Choi, and we trained with Bang Soo Han. We trained with, one of my big fans is Fumio Demura. Really, and Nishiyama, Oshima first. They had front kicks from hell. They taught us. We did all our front kicks over chairs. You go it forward and drive your hip in and pull it back and don't knock the chair down, going or coming. And so we trained with Oshima, and then when he left to France, we trained with Nishiyama, and we trained with Seo Choi and Bang Soo Han and Fumio Demura. We trained in Thai boxing, trained in American boxing. I remember my first lesson in boxing. I have real long arms. I'm pretty tall, and you got to be 6'6" to have arms longer than me. But when I would go train, I would find out what my strengths were and what my weaknesses were. And so Fumio Demura, Sensei Nishiyama, Seo Choi, Bang Soo Han, my big advantage. And then I later trained for a long time with the Gracies and the Machados. In fact, I gave them, the Machados, 2 years free rent in one of my shopping centers in Encino. And it's called, it's still there today. It's called Wall Street Village. And 3 miles west of that is my shopping center, Wall Street Plaza. But I helped those kids, 5 brothers. I gave them free rent for 2 years and brought them over 100 students. So I really set them up. And the only one that really appreciated it was Hegan Machado, who's a dear friend. I love him. But the rest of them never quite appreciated it. So that's when I started realizing, wow, it's one thing to be tough, but it's another thing to be a nice human being, law-abiding citizen, non-drug using, good father, good parent, good husband, good mate, good friend. And so those lessons I learned from people like Chuck Norris and many others. So that's the real background when you start thinking. It's one thing to get to be tough, but you get tough at one thing, somebody else is tougher at something else. And so luckily for me in my era, we did a lot of street testing of our techniques. Initially, a lot of people came in our schools and I just say, lock the door. And then ambulance would come and pick up the remains. But so we got to field test. And that was a big advantage of my street fighting. I did a lot of street fighting. So I got to field test stuff. But then you're a tough guy. And then you get to be an egotist. And then you can abuse that skill. And so then you have to go back to the respect that Ed Parker and Frank Trejo and so many of the great ones were really good at. But you take Ed Parker. He never set up an organization so he could pass on what he did, because he didn't know he was going to die at 59. And so that was his error, maybe. But I learned you got to make yourself financially stable. If you're a black belt and you run a school, you deserve to have a nice car, a nice home, and supply your family with security. But then you need to get over this egotism, and you need to become a nice human being. It's character. Focus on being of good character. So all those things have given me blessings to the point where I told you I taught Elvis, Jack Palance, Brian Keith, Paul Newman, Edgar Stummas, Steve McQueen, Freddie. I was the highest paid instructor in the world. Back in those days, I was getting $250 a lesson. And a lesson wasn't an hour. A lesson was whatever I said it was, half an hour or 2 hours, depending on if you could take it and what your mindset was. But respect. I probably taught more celebrities than anybody alive when I was teaching, but I never asked them for a picture. I never played subservient or superior. But the advantage of being a great instructor is that your students are always slightly fearful. But my last student was Freddie Prinze, whom I loved, funniest guy on earth. And I told him, I said, you know, one of the things I resented coming up as a white belt, green belt, and so on, was as soon as I got good enough to hurt my instructor, he kicked the shit out of me. I go, well, that doesn't make me very confident. I don't ever want to hit you again. So I said, I don't believe in that. When I get you good enough, it was 9 months for Freddie. He was 6'2", 200 pounds. And I said, Freddie, when I finally get you, first of all, never quit. If you run them into the ground, don't quit until they quit. Okay? But when you finally hit me, and you will, I'm going to stop you and congratulate you. Well, 9 months into his training, my backyard, and I was giving away Steve McQueen and Freddie. I was giving away everybody, but Freddie was my last student. And so one day he hit me with a right and split my eye open. Now, just 7 months earlier, he kept bugging me about sparring. And I said, Freddie, you don't want to spar with me, because if you do, I'm going to knock you out. Well, I'm not afraid. Okay, I'm only going to use my left leg. So we sparred, and I threw a fake front hooking round, knocked him out. He's on the ground bleeding, and I pick him up. I said, Freddie, you don't have the tools, buddy. No more sparring until I say so. So 8 months later, I started sparring with him. He had some tools. 9 months, he hits me with a right and split my right open, blood spurting. He looks at me, he's like in shock. He runs in the house, he gets a towel, runs back, and he's blocking, sopping up the blood. And then he had his bag there. The class was only about half over. And he ran out and jumped in his blue Corvette and raced away. So I go to the house, and I said, my wife, Lily, I said, what happened to Freddie? She said, I don't know. He just raced away. 30 minutes later, his wife calls me, and Freddie's wife, and who's still a good friend. She's a lovely woman. And she called me. She said, do you know what that crazy SOB is doing? I said, I don't know what that crazy SOB is. I mean, I know he left before the class was over. That crazy SOB is making a frame for this towel with your blood on it. And he's right in there writing now, Bob Wall's blood, 1975, dee-da-da-da, boom, but I hit him with the right and bing-a-da-bob. He was so excited. He couldn't stand it. Well, that was the answer. I didn't retaliate. I didn't kick the shit out of him. He knew I was better than him. So then it was really funny. Muhammad Ali called me, and he wanted to meet Freddie because he heard that Freddie did him as well as he did. And I said, no, Muhammad, he does you better than you. If I put you in a room and put him in another room, we're all going to pick Freddie as the real Muhammad Ali. I'm so fast. When I hit the light, I'm in bed before the light goes out. So he's doing the greatest. So we go to the Beverly Hilton Hotel, and I go with Freddie, and Muhammad was married to his first wife, and she was a black belt in Taekwondo, tall, about 6 feet. So we walk in, Mom's on the phone. So she starts talking karate. And she's married to Muhammad Ali, the greatest heavyweight boxer of all time, but I'm the big deal because I'm a karate guy, right? So anyway, I thought that was amusing. I said, you're married to one of the great boxers of all time, and certainly the greatest heavyweight. Anyway, he gets off the phone. And so Muhammad was on the phone, and right next to him was Freddie, and then right next to him was my back, and then his wife. And so Muhammad gets off the phone, and he throws a double jab at Freddie's head. Bah! And Freddie does a round kick, kicks him in the face, knocks him over into the couch, and he looks and he says, you must be a Bob Wall student. And then he took Freddie with him on tour, sparring. That's how good Freddie was in less than a year.
Let's go to, so we've gone down through some of your instructors, LeBell. Lewis. You meet up with Chuck Norris.
I met
Tell us-
Chuck in 1963, 4-ish. We were in Seattle. I was 64 because there was a guy that did a so-called world championships in 63 in Chicago. And then Steve Armstrong did the one in 64. Only 2 weight divisions. And I won the heavyweight division. He won the lightweight division. But lightweights went first. So I watched him all day long. And I thought, this guy is amazing. Chuck Norris has the best timing of anybody I've ever seen, then and now. Not necessarily the fastest, not necessarily the strongest, but that guy, when I gave him the tape, Psycho-Cybernetics, he blew his mind because he thought, you know, my God, this is what I've been doing all this time. He imagined what his opponent was going to do, and he played it in his mind in advance. And so that's why he beat everybody. Money. I said, well, how many schools you got? He said, oh, only one. You can't make money in karate. I said, really? I've got a school in Sherman Oaks making 50 grand a year. And he said, you're kidding. I said, no. So why don't you come down and run my school for a week, and then I'll go down and Redondo Beach, where his school was. And I'd say, Dwayne, you've been here for, he had 300 students. Well, I know math. 125 students is break even. That's where you can pay your rent, your advertising, everything. And I'm a master of martial arts. And I'm the first person to create a martial arts system, manualized, which I still have. And I gave it to everybody from the Tracys, everybody. Anybody who asked me, I gave it freely because that's what martial artists do properly. You give respect and you give any information that can help. So June Rhee, my system. Tracy's, my system. Everybody, anybody who asked me, Pat Burleson, Alan Steen, all of them, their systems came from my manual in 1964. And I still have the manual. Okay. But anyway, wound up with Chuck and I building the largest chain of martial arts school in the world. But so that to me is respect. When your seniors like Ed Parker or the Tracys or June Rhee or anybody of that ilk, Pat Burleson, Alan Steen, they ask you, you give, you show them the respect they've earned. And so that's, you know, why I became wealthy and successful, stayed married, no lying, no cheating, no stealing. But always when people ask me, just like this podcast or anything else, anybody ask me, I don't care if they're known or unknown, I do it for free. I show up. That's my respect to somebody like you who deserves respect with all you've done, being Frank Trejo's first black belt, starting the Kempo Hall of Fame, which is absolutely proper. But I do what I'm asked. I'm showing respect. That's the bottom line.
So let's take me through a lesson with Chuck Norris and you. What did you guys exchange?
So I met
did you
him
learn from
and
him?
I went down. He came to my school and ran it for a week, and I went to his school. And I'd say, Fred, have you paid? You know, you've been here 10 months, $100 a month, just to pick a figure. And he'd say, yeah, sure. I said, well, I don't see any receipts. You got a canceled check or a receipt? No. Well, then you owe me $1,000 and I want it tomorrow. I'm not going to pay. Well, yes, you are. I'll come to your home and kick your ass. And I did. And it only took 2 beatings. I kicked him through the screen, and then ripped the door off, walked in and slapped him and got the money. And after that, that got around. I did one more guy a couple of days later. Everybody decided they wanted to pay. So in 30 days, I brought Chuck Norris 36 grand. And he was astounded. He couldn't believe it. There were that many, but you have no books. You have no contracts. Oh, we can't have contracts. No, contracts are good. They're written understanding, so there's no misunderstanding. So that's really how I got to be friends with him. And then I have, you know, half of my wife's family. She's DeSimone, Sicilian. And so I had a lot of mobster family, and they would get me plane tickets for $50 first class to New York. And so I'd give them to Chuck Norris and Mike Stone and Pat Burleson. They all, if you talk to any of them, they'll tell you experiences about me giving them first class tickets. But anyway, Chuck is just like Mike Stone, just a really good guy. Different, totally different people, but really good guys. And the word is gold. Their martial arts is unparalleled, and they're not egotists, you know. And like you, each of them have put back into martial arts, just as I did. I wrote the first Who's Who in '75.
Mhm.
And I didn't put me in it, but I put 131 men and women, black, white, green, orange, red, purple, brown, because I wanted to show respect to martial arts. And respect is not writing a book and featuring yourself.
Right.
Respect is featuring the people that are your superiors. All 131 men and women in my first Who's Who in 75 were superior to me. So I wanted them to get the respect they earned.
Is that when you created the World Black Belt organization?
We started that later, 53 of us, the greatest 53 martial artists at the time. And that key was I wanted every kid on earth to see their face. That's the reason I picked 53. I wanted black, brown, orange, red, yellow, purple, green, white. And so Gene LeBell, Chuck Norris, and a lot of other super famous people. But if you look on the 53 founders, there is not a nationality or a color on earth that's not in there. Okay. Again, so that every little kid, brown, black, yellow, orange, purple, green, white, would see an image of himself. Hawaiians, Chinese, you name it. There is no nationality that I can think of that's not in the 53 founding members. But that's what I did. I wanted to give respect to everybody that was famous in their ethnicity, whether they were Kempo or Judo or Jiu-Jitsu or karate or whatever. I wanted them to be front and center. And that's when we started that. And the idea was to communicate and give a communication system. Part of what started it was my wife at that time, her cell phone was Lil Wall, or her email was lilwall@pacbell.net. I didn't know diddly. Today I'm only a blue belt in computer. I can send and receive emails and I can Google, and that's about it. But I only got one way to do everything. If it doesn't work, I'm screwed. But I said, Lil, how does anybody ever get your email? She says, oh, you have to give it to them. So I thought with World Black Belt, Chuck Norris at worldblackbelt.com, Bob Wall at worldblackbelt.com. It was Jim Harrison at worldblackbelt.com. You just knew their name and you put it in .com and you had them.
Yeah.
So that has given us the worldwide, we've got the world's biggest organization. It's free. And you come in and you join and you may have 10 other emails, but you got, Chuck Norris at worldblackbelt.com or Gene LeBell at worldblackbelt.com or Bob Wall at World. You got them. Just put in their name. You can today put in Bob Wall at worldblackbelt.com and you got me. You don't have to be given it. So we did a lot of other things. We got hotel benefits, where you get discounts at hotels. We had our own Black Belt credit card, which I happen to have a copy of right here. And so maybe you can see it. Maybe you can't.
There it is. Yeah, there it is.
But
Is that you jumping and doing the kick?
Say what?
Is that you kicking?
That is me.
Yeah, because there's a very famous photo. Say, okay, so you're training a bit with, did you just exchange ideas with Chuck? Or was it just?
No, Chuck was my finishing school, because one of our successes, why we built the largest chain of martial arts schools ever, he was the better karate guy. I was a better street fighter. We weren't selling street fighting. I was a better grappler. We weren't selling that. He was the better karate guy. So we said, okay, you want to be famous? I don't. I only want to be famous at the bank. And I'm famous at several banks. I walk in there and they say, your vault is ready, Mr. Walt. That's what I want. I go out in the street, nobody knows who I am. Chuck always wanted to be famous. So our contract, we never had one, was oral. Chuck is the most trustworthy, honest, super Christian you've ever met. He's a fabulous partner. But he ran, you're the boss on the mat, I'm the boss off the mat. I'm the better businessman. So I created the manual. Therefore, we had a fabulous partnership.
So you're both distinguished. And so really, but did you spend time on the mat fighting, sparring?
Oh, all the time.
What were the things that you focused on?
I got my butt kicked by Chuck like 500 million times, just like Joe Louis. I don't think I ever won a fight against either one of them. But Joe made me tough standing up. Gene LeBell made me tough ground floor. Chuck Norris was my finishing school because he had every kick in the book. I'd never seen a spinning back kick before him. I'd never seen a round kick. I mean, he just had all the tools. But he's a very kind man. He never hurt you unless you hurt him. You hurt him, you made a big mistake. Chuck Norris is 10 times tougher than people think he is because he doesn't hurt people unless you hurt him. You hit him in the face, oh, you're going to pay for it.
Sure. What is the greatest lesson you learned from Chuck Norris, the martial artist?
Be honest. Be trustworthy. Be respectful. I mean, that's 3 lessons, but all came in one. Chuck is a fabulous human being. He's a solid Christian. He doesn't lie, cheat, or steal. He was a great martial artist. He and I always argued, though. He
Sure.
never was in a street fight. I've been in a million of them.
Really?
And yeah, he doesn't believe in violence. And I believe that there's certain nasty, scummy people like Hitler, like ISIS people, nasty killers.
Sure.
They deserve to be, I call it today, recycled. In the old day, when I was a sniper in the Army, I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I was arranging a meeting between bad people and the Lord. And it's up to him to send them to hell or recycle them and keep them in heaven.
Okay, so let's move on to one of your last teachers. And because you had mentioned the honesty, truthfulness, etc., that you learned from Mr. Norris, the quote is simple: truth exists outside of all molds and patterns, and awareness is never exclusive. Truth is never a set idea, and definitely not a conclusion. Styles and methods are conclusions, but the truth of life is a process. That is your friend Bruce Lee. Quote from him. What did you learn from Bruce Lee?
Just exactly that. But, you know, he was great because I taught him a lot. When I met him, he didn't throw a spinning back kick, a side kick, a round kick, a crescent kick. I got a lot of pictures and tapes of me teaching him. But what he taught me was a big difference between street fighting. There's a million different kinds of fighting: film fighting, kickboxing, judo, jiu-jitsu, MMA. People don't realize, if they stop and think about it, there's a million different kinds of fighting, just like sex, hate, love, gymnastic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what Bruce taught me, Chuck Norris and I both, was film fighting, which Bruce was the greatest, is to this day. Nobody's ever created a better film. Enter the Dragon, highest grossing martial arts film in history. Budget, 850,000. A lot of people don't realize, less than $1 million. Grossed over $1 billion. Bruce Lee taught us how to take a punch or a kick. And he called it, he said, if you come with a kick like this, you missed it. So it's cutting the tape. When you get the kick and it comes here, then you must relax your neck and your shoulders and time it. And then it looks real. And then Bruce carried it a step further with me because I perfected how to take punches and kicks. I don't care who it is, George Foreman, Jerry Query, Madame. So he popped me full power. And I had learned after Joe Louis broke my ribs in '64, I never wanted that to happen again. So Bruce called it the string line. So if the string line is coming this way from here down, and you do that, it doesn't sell. So wherever the string line comes, the string line is at your chin. And when it breaks, that's the time to relax your shoulders, your neck, and everything, and you sell it. Well, then you add to that, with me, Bruce always hit me full power. So when he kicked me in the head, we put a little cushion in his sock. So when he blasts me, he was asleep, bam. Well, then I relax, I drop my chin. So I use all the elements, plus that way it didn't cut my chin. When he hits me, though, side kick, full power, take it. What's the secret? Well, most people don't teach it. The secret is, if I take a brown paper bag, fill it full of air, 7-year-old girl will break that bag. Fill a fresh one. George Foreman won't break it if you do one thing. Think about it, the string line. Let it go. No air. Other guys go, okay, I'm ready. Well, you hit hard enough, you've held trapped all the air in your body. So the answer is let the air go. When you get hit, let the air go. String line. So Bruce Lee taught me all those things. He was the greatest film fighter in history and a super nice man. Kind, funny, brilliant. You want to throw him, give him a martial arts book. He didn't care if it was an Indonesian. He didn't care. He'd watch the pictures. Mm-hmm. He'd go to somebody and get him to translate. You know, Bruce was brilliant, kind, wonderful, a huge loss. That man, to lose him at 32, it's as heartbreaking to me as thinking about you losing your daughter at 13. I can cry if I think about it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about the pain you went through. I damn sure feel a huge loss with Bruce Lee 47 and a half years later. We should have never lost that man. We should have never lost your daughter. But that's just life. You got to take the hand you're dealt. But Bruce Lee, he was amazing. He was
So let's
brilliant.
talk about you've already talked about film. I will get into that a little bit. What was the best lesson you taught Bruce? They said, thank you for sharing that with me.
Well, it
Or
was,
did he ever say something like that? He may
yeah,
not.
it was, I remember when he did Fist of Fury, he called me from Thailand and he hated the director. And he said, Bob, I've been here a week and a half and they're only giving me rice and tea and I'm losing my cuts. I'm losing weight. And I got him on protein. Can you send me some protein? Sure. So I sent him 3 big cans of protein. And then he said, well, I'm broke. So I sent him $5,000. So my lesson was, I'm rich, you're not. How to invest, own real estate. Okay. You've got to live on 60% of your gross income and 40% you save. Okay. For investments and taxes. And so my lessons to him, there were a few things. Like he didn't throw a round kick, I did. He didn't throw a spinning back kick, I did. He didn't throw a crescent kick, I did. So everything you see him kill me and Enter the Dragon, I taught him. But he taught me about filmmaking. He taught me about the string line. He taught me about attitude. He was very kind. He had a temper like me, but rarely showed it. Andre Morgan, who is fabulous. He's one of the great producers of all time. He was from Kansas and he spoke Cantonese and Mandarin. I speak Cantonese, I speak French, I speak Spanish, and I speak a little English. So Andre came on the set and he'd come and say, you have to wear the certain outfit for tomorrow. No, I'm not doing it. I know what I want to wear. Yeah. So a Bruce Lee film was a Bruce Lee film. A Chuck Norris film was a Chuck Norris film. But he rose up to one day, he started running everything for Bruce Lee's partner. I set up Bruce Lee's production company, Concord. And I taught him that you're the asset. You don't have to have any money. And therefore, when he did Enter the Dragon, the budget was $850. Bruce got $300,000. Lalo Schiffer got $150. That only left $400 for the whole film. So I taught him to make money. I talked him into buying his home in Hong Kong. So had he lived, first of all, I would have guided him financially and he'd be like me, living in a mansion that's paid for, and he would have a lot of money. So I guess basically the thing I taught him was his honesty was appreciated by my honesty. We didn't lie, cheat, or steal. And we were really close friends because he loved everything to be realistic. People who don't understand today, Bruce Lee only had say-so in 3 of his 5 movies, and I co-starred in all 3. Why? Answer. Because first of all, I let him kick the shit out of me. I didn't care. I'm world champion. So what? He wasn't. My job was to make him look good. I did it. I sold it. Okay. And so he loved that. Why my favorite picture is a picture of him hugging me at the end of Into the Dragon. We loved each other. I loved him then. I love him now. And in all the years he's been dead, I've given him nothing but respect. And I told Linda, I said, I'll be at your events whenever you ask me. Just pay me coach and give me a room. And then I upgraded. But sure. Linda is fabulous.
Let's take you through. So I get what you told me about. What was Bruce's approach that you influenced him about street fighting? Because you made a distinction between you and Chuck Norris about fighting. He was more in the competition sport. You are street fighting, real. That's an Ed Parker thing. Mr. Parker came off of the streets of Hawaii. He understood that. He had a judo background. He went into boxing. He later took on the ideas of Professor Chow, and he created American Kempo, which later on he shared those ideas with Bruce when they sat down. And the Internationals in '64 was a great example of showcasing this young martial artist with innovative thoughts. And my discussion with Mike Stone, he talked about after winning the tournament that night, and they went out to dinner. It was Bruce, Mike Stone, Jun Rhee, and Ed Parker. Mr. Parker and Jun Rhee talked about tournaments and whatnot. Lee and Stone talked about martial arts and competition in the street, real, making it real. Because as you know, Mike Stone is real. He's the real deal. Great champion.
Guaranteed.
There's no doubt there. Okay. And he's the one that will tell you as it is, wonderful conversations. And he's very positive with this message. And so you and him are part of this Warriors discussion. So let's talk about that. So you're talking about the competition with Lee. How was his mindset? How did he distinguish in conversations with you that you brought to the discussion about, well, you might be doing that in a film, and I understand that, but the reason you can do that, sir, is because I know how to take those shots, because I have fought on the street. I have been engaged with that. Why don't you give us a little insight into that?
Well, the reality is that you can't be fearful. You know, if I ever felt any fear in a street fight, it was for the other person. And and Bruce had the same way. Bruce did a lot of street fighting when he was young, 13, for 5 years with Yip Man. But once he got into the fight with Wong Man Jack,
Yeah.
and Bruce beat him up. And I met him right after that. And then he said he was surprised how easy the fight was, but he was also equally surprised how tired he was. And I said, well, do you run? No. So we started running together. And I'm a natural born runner. I run pretty fast. And I run backwards and forwards and sideways. And I run 100, walk 100. And I do all kinds of, I challenge myself always with running. And so Bruce and I ran a lot together, and we trained a lot together. And he'd been in a lot of street fights, but he realized he was one-dimensional with Wing Chun, which is great, but it's one-dimensional. So I got him with Gene LeBell, and so in the original Game of Death, Bruce chokes out Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Well, that was Gene LeBell, the father of MMA. They always say Bruce Lee. No, not even close. Gene LeBell is the father of MMA. He did the first professional MMA fight against Milo Savage in Salt Lake City. They wouldn't let it happen anywhere else. And he put him unconscious for over 20 minutes. But Bruce got it. And with me, I introduced him to Jim Harrison and Jim Harrison, Pat Burleson, all my buddies. And so he got to come to the school and train with Joe Louis and all of us. And that raised his awareness, because people say, well, why didn't Bruce fight in tournaments? He didn't care. He wasn't interested. He wanted to be the greatest film fighter. That was his focus. He was an actor. He was brilliant. And he did it. Bruce Lee was the greatest film fighter of all time. Nobody has ever outgrossed him. And he's been dead 47 and a half years. So there were just so many lessons. But you know what you get? It's something like what you got from Frank Trejo or Ed Parker, is when you care for somebody and when you respect them, you share. I've never turned anybody down for anything. If you're a martial artist and you ask me, it will be done. Okay. Now I get paid a lot of money to do Bruce Lee seminars, but that's another story. The fact is, you're there for your friends. Well, Bruce Lee taught me as much as I taught him, but we had different skill sets. And so it's a tragedy that he's gone, but it's also a tragedy that Ed Parker's gone. And it's a tragedy that Frank Trejo is gone. And thank God people like Mike Stone and Chuck Norris are still with us, and yourself for that matter, because you guys are all people who have contributed.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm here too.
Let me tell you, you earn any compliment.
I appreciate that compliment. Thank you.
I have great respect for the top tier Kempo guys. And so anyway, the point is,
oh, sure,
give back. At a certain point, you've gotten so many rewards. Being a black belt under Frank Trejo is a big deal. And getting to know Ed Parker is a big deal. Getting to know Mike Stone is a big deal. For me, getting to know Bruce Lee was a big deal. So I always wanted to do everything I could for them. Mike Stone came to my grand opening with Joe Louis. He came all the way down from Huntington Beach. He didn't have to do that. It was just kindness. It's the kind of...
He's a good man. He's a very good man. It's funny, in our discussion in our first interview with what I had with Mike, he said, that night he had this long conversation. It was just him and Bruce, exchanging ideas, giving to one another. And you could sense that there was this reception and this exchange flowing. It was beautiful. So he said when he worked out with Bruce, and he was close with Bruce for the last, 5 years of his life or so, he said to me, he says, well, I got done working with him and we competed, we were just sparring and such. And I would have loved to see that fight. But But he said, when he got done, he said, Brewster said, there's two people I would never want to meet in a dark alley. Jim Harrison and Mike Stone.
Well, that's pretty
Pretty
smart.
real. That's pretty real.
Those were two tough guys.
No doubt. No doubt. When you think about this. So let's go to this a question. How much training did you do with Mike Stone?
Not much, because Mike in those days, you know, we knew each other real well. I had a lot of respect for him. But I'll give you a story. Jim Harrison and I went down to meet Mike Stone, and we go to his house. And so Mike is talking, and he kind of back knuckles me in the shoulder, you know. And then he talks a little more, and he back knuckles me in the shoulder. So about the third time, I back knuckle him back in the shoulder. And he says, "Hey, you hit me." I said, "I only doing what you're doing." He said, "I didn't hit you." And Jim Harrison said, "Yes, you did. You hit him twice." He said, "I did?" So Mike's just reflecting. But anyway, we go to the gym, and there was another guy there, thank God, and he wanted to spar Mike. And Mike says, "If you spar me, it's a challenge, and I'm going to hurt you real bad." So I don't want any part of that kid. Mike Stone was the first great martial arts superstar. But he felt when you sparred, it was a death match. And he threw, in those days, very unique. Each of these fighters in those days, you know, Pat Burleson, first national champion,
right,
and Jim Harrison, and Joe Louis, and Mike Stone. They were the original superstars. But Mike Stone, he bowed, and everybody did real deep bows, and not Mike. He bowed about 2 inches, and then he hit you with what was called a hooking front kick. Nobody threw it then. So he would throw a hooking front kick on a right ridge hand and come back with a left ridge hand, and he would take your head off. He was not kidding around. And in '63, when he was world champ, you didn't get disqualified. You could knock somebody out. It was an accident. But if you did it twice, then you got disqualified. So Mike knew when he bowed in, he'd throw that hooking front kick, which nobody did. They threw either a front kick or a round kick, but he threw a hooking, like an angle between the two. And he would try to take your liver out. He would try to break your ribs. He would try to break your hips, you know, and then he hit you whack with this ridge hand. Nobody threw ridge hands but Mike Stone. So he was like a phenomenon. And but he only fought in 12 tournaments. He always says he had 89 black belt fights. But when I took first and second in the internationals, for example, I fought 14 times. And I beat Louis Delgado. And then the next year, I lost to Jim Bottoms. But it was simple. You stepped in there and you fought. You didn't get to the finals unless you fought 14 or 15 times. Because even then, when you won your division, you know, and my division was middleweight at that time, so I was trying to stay out of Joe Louis's way. And you get there. Now, the lightweight champ, which is always Steve Sanders Muhammad, phenomenal. I mean, I can't remember how many years he won, but he always won the lightweight division. Then he'd fight Chuck Norris, and unfortunately, Chuck would win for Sanders' side. And then the same thing, then they would fight the lightweight winner or the middleweight winner, then would fight the light heavyweight winner. And so that usually wound up being Chuck Norris winning as the middleweight, and later Joe Louis winning as the heavyweight. So you fought 15 times to be the champion. So when you only fought 89 fights, you only fought 12 tournaments.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. But to give him his due, you know, he had a Hawaiian instructor that was amazing, but he was done with it. He proved everything. He won the nationals. He won the internationals. He won the world championships. He won everything there was to win. So, you know, give him credit. You know, the only time he lost
in your film career, let's go there. In a film career, you actually worked with him. I'm going to bring up now some of the things that most people recognize you for, you know, but they don't realize the foundation that led up to that. So in your filmography, you obviously started the first one in here. Now this is what is listed, so it may be incorrect, but you can correct it for me. 72, The Way of the Dragon. 73, Enter the Dragon. 74, Black Belt Jones, Jim Kelly. Game of Death in 78, Enter the Ninja in 81. Code of Silence in 85. Invasion USA, 85. Firewalker, 86. The Hero and Terror, 88. Sidekicks in 92. Then in 2004, Sci-Fighter, 209, Blood and Bone. Autonomy of an Anti-Hero 3 in 2018. 2020, The Search for Count Dante. And I love the last one. 2020, Autonomy of the Anti-Hero Redemption, and you are the character Master Wall. Due time. It took them a while to get there, buddy, but I'm going to tell you right now, should have been that. You know, some of these film, you know, they have their merit. Some of them are amazing. Some are just entertaining, and some, you know, but for the fighting aspect. But I have to say, I would equate you to be, before Star Wars came out and they developed, you know, Darth Vader, the conflicted individual that started into the dark side and, you know, whatever. I think in the martial arts, I think you were the precursor to that character in The Way of the Dragon, when you started out and you fought with Bruce in that movie. And it's that movie actually offers a lot there for the martial artist and just the fan, because there's some really great fighting scenes between you and Lee. There's no doubt. And then later on, the beauty of it, as you were a student of Mr. Norris, I don't think he was called Norris in the movie. I don't remember his character's name is, but regardless, he comes off and he fights with Bruce, and you had a hand involving with the Colosseum in Italy, Rome. But that fight scene, when you watch it, it was so far ahead of its time on the choreography, the filmography, the special effects, very little, some slow motion and whatnot. And you could actually see the work. And then when it came back to real, boom, it was, you could see how fast they were working. So when you're in there, the passion of your fights in that first movie established you. So when you came back in Enter the Dragon, that was serious business. And, you know, I know there's backstories there, and I know you could probably elaborate on a little bit. I know you also brought in Jim Kelly. I know Steve Sanders, Steve Muhammad made a cameo in the movie. I know that Donnie Williams is in it, you know, briefly. So, you know, it is the standard for the martial arts. It is an amazing film. It is in the martial arts community, action and relevance. It is the Gone with the Wind of its time and today. It really is. You can't, I don't know how you can recapture the magic and put it back in a bottle. It's very difficult, and it's so believable. So walk me through Way of the Dragon and how that came about, the fight scene with you and Lee. I know you worked at it really hard. Explain it so that our listeners can understand a little bit of what a film fight is.
Well, first of all, Chuck Norris was Bruce Lee's favorite martial artist, okay? And correctly so. Chuck was great. He was one of the greatest fighters of all time, and like Mike Stone, won everything, internationals, nationals. He won them all twice. And but anyway, so Chuck and I were partners, and we were training. And I had already 4 black belts, and he wanted me to be one of his black belts. And I go, oh, I don't want to learn, you know, all these friggin' katas up the Basai. But Chuck was determined. We're partners, so I have to be a fellow, you know, black belt with him. And so we were training, and we just finished. And literally the next day, I had my black belt test. But Bruce Lee called, and he wanted Chuck to come to do Way of the Dragon. And so we got off the money. He was really excited. So I'm going to go to Italy and Hong Kong, and I'm going to be in a film with Bruce Lee. And I said, yeah, well, you're not going without me, pal. So I paid my own way. Okay. So now, of course, we're way back in coach. And so he grabs me and he says, and he was real shy in those days. He said, Bob, Bruce asked me to come out of the plane first because he can't afford to get an airplane to come and shoot the scene. So we're going to actually shoot the plane that we land there. So in the Way of the Dragon, that is the plane that Chuck and I flew in. So anyway, but I'm not shy. So I went up to the flight attendant in first class, and I asked her for a favor, and I told her we're doing a movie and some low budget, and we need Mr. Norris to walk up pass the first class passengers and go out first. And all we need is 30 seconds. So then she approved it. And then I went and I asked everybody in first class, so listen, we're doing this little movie. Could you just wait for Mr. Norris, who nobody knew who he was, or me? We were nobodies in coach. So when he walks off the plane, all Bruce told him was look left and look right and look menacing. That's what he did. In the film, that's the plane we landed on. And I set it up. So anyway, we get there. Bruce is all excited because he got the shot and for $5. And he says, oh, you're here. Okay, you're in the movie. Now, there was no script for Way of the Dragon. So just because I was there, he agreed to pay me $75 a week. Chuck got $150, I think. But anyway, the budget was very low. So then his fantasy was to film in the Coliseum. And it was closed. It'd been closed for years. It's a very dangerous place because it had many, many floors. And they would always just build over the previous floor and then the previous floor and then the previous floor. And a lot of them would fall through, And the cages for the animals, the humans, were 4 feet. So I don't know if the people were that little or they made them crouch in there, but they were brutal. I got pictures of them. But anyway, so my wife is Sicilian. And one of her uncles ran one of the states in America. It was Jack DeSimone. So I called and got his number and called him and asked him if there's any way he could get us into the Coliseum. And so he called his friends in Sicily, which is quite a distance from Rome. But anyway, he came. I got pictures of the mafiosos with Chuck and Bruce and I in the Coliseum.
Actually lets you take the photos?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. They're not afraid of anybody. So anyway, they came up and they wanted a big bunch of money and Bruce couldn't afford it. The whole budget for Way of the Dragon was $250. And so anyway, Bruce was brokenhearted and I walked him down to the car and I said, listen, my wife's uncle is Jack DeSimone. Is there any way you could help me out here? This guy is poor and he really is dying to get in there. We only need to be in there for a short time. And so they gave a figure and I said, oh man, this whole budget, he just can't afford that. Could you do it for like 10 grand? They said, we'll do it for 15 cash. So I ran back up, told Bruce, we ran to the bank and got the cash and we were in there for 2 weeks. Thank you, Sicilian Mafia.
God bless. You know what? I guess it's important to know the right people in the right time. Timing is
still
everything.
Married 52 years later because there's only one way out of a Sicilian marriage. It's with a toe tag.
Yeah, we're not going to forget that one. So let's
Luckily,
move on.
I love my wife.
I really like the idea because you've delved in it a little bit. You've given us a background of your martial arts journey. You have solid foundation. There's no question. You understand what it is to fight somebody on the street. You understand about the competition side. Now you're growing into filmography and developing how to choreograph fight. But with this case, no script. So let's delve into your fight scene about you and Bruce in the Way of the Dragon. And the reason I'm referencing this because it's very important because it sets up the iconic Enter the Dragon scenes later. You're fighting, okay? So you're there. You're with Lee and his production crew. Where was it filmed, and how many days did it involve your contributions being on there, and how your input is on how that worked? Because I'm guessing he had his ideas, but you're working with him, so it's got to be. He seems like the kind of guy that you had a relationship that chemistry was right there. You could put something together. You can do variations of it, and it's obvious as a result. So tell me about that.
Well, the first thing is that Bruce and I trained for over 10 years together. And so we were really close friends. And secondly, Bruce was very smart and always wanted to discuss everything. I mean, I got pictures of me sitting with him and standing with him discussing his fight with Chuck Norris, which is one of the best ever. And he thought it was important that Chuck, gets the better of him in the beginning, and then he comes back by changing his motion. But also, because he really loved and admired Chuck Norris, he wanted to show him respect. So Bruce was a true martial artist, and so that was why when he finds up killing Chuck's character, he puts the belt on him. It's his respect. And so it was very emotional doing it. But the great thing about Bruce was the same as Chuck Norris. They're non-egotists. They would discuss everything. You tell them your opinion, and Bruce and Chuck, mostly 90% went ahead and did what they wanted to do anyway, but you got to at least put in your piece. But the secret with Bruce and I was that I can take better punches and kicks than anybody I ever met. And so I never wore a pad in my life. I'm a warrior. And so the fact that Bruce could lay it on me, and he did every scene 4, 5, 6 times, I would just do your thing. So he'd basically tell me what he wanted me to do and basically what he was going to do. But we both agreed the best reaction is real. If I punch you or I kick you and I'm really kicking you and I'm really punching you, you're going to react because you're forced to. And because of Bruce's lessons about string line, I knew how to relax. It's the reverse of street fighting. It's the reverse of pro fighting, pro karate, MMA. You don't ever show your opponent you got hurt. Never. But in the film, because I could take the punches and because Bruce was a perfectionist, every scene 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Okay. And so therefore, my favorite picture of Bruce and I is him hugging me when it's over. He kicked the shit out of me for 3 months. And let me tell you something it's one thing to take Bruce's punch or kicks and he's trying to lay me down. He's trying to break something. Every scene, well, I'm going to break something. You little Chinaman, you can't break the shit. That was just he and I, nobody else, just friends. Well, he got a lot of respect for me. But let me tell you, about the 4th time Bruce Lee is going to hit you full power, you're going, I am probably the stupidest human on earth. The first 2 times, 3 times, okay. But the 4th or 5th, you're going, oh my God. I was so sore, so beat up. It took me 3 months to get over it when I got back. But he loved me because I would take it. And if people never understand, why is only Bob Wall co-star in Bruce Lee's last 3 films? He had no say-so in the first 2, or I'd have been there. And I signed to do the 6th one with Paolo Conti. But respect, love, admiration. And I hate prejudice of any type. Nobody born has prejudice. They don't born saying, I don't like brown people, black people, red people, and all that bullshit. No. So I saw him go through a lot of prejudice, and nobody but Freddie Weintraub and I believed he could be the first international Asian superstar, which he is to this day. Nobody has succeeded that since then. So the mere fact, why did I do Way the Dragon for $75 a week? Why did I do Enter the Dragon for $500 a week? Now, I got paid a fortune when I did Game of Death because he was gone for 4 years. So my wife and I decided, hey, I'm making a lot more money. I'm making 12, 15 grand a week here in real estate. So I'm not going to go there for free because I did it for Bruce Lee. What's important, I loved Bruce Lee. And I felt I had a skill set that I could give him to make him look better. And I didn't care. Nobody else wanted to come back and do a film. Chuck Norris particularly, much I love him. He lost once, he was going to lose again. He was going to be a star, and it was a correct decision. It was a business decision. It was a career decision. I never wanted to be an actor. I didn't give a shit. What I loved was martial arts. And I thought Bruce Lee was the greatest film fighter of all time. So I wanted to be there to make it as good as possible. Well, it was as good as possible because it was for real. He was kicking the shit out of me. I was a kicking bag. And so who knew? When I got off the phone with Bruce, when he asked me to do Way of the Dragon, he said, yeah, the budget's pretty low. I can only pay you $500 a week. And I hired everybody. I hired Jim Kelly. I hired Steve Sanders, Muhammad.
You mean what? You mean Enter the Dragon? Enter
the Dragon. I hired them. I hired Jim Kelly. I got Steve Muhammad and Donnie. And this is a funny story because Jim Kelly, we were good buddies, but he flew with me. And 2 days before we were flying out, I only hired him 4 days. I said, oh, by the way, I wanted Steve Sanders, now Muhammad, in the film, he and Donnie. And so I didn't know that Jim Kelly had opened up a school close by and they were bitter enemies. I didn't know that. But anyway, so I called Jim Kelly and said, okay, tomorrow we got to shoot the scene, in Steve Sanders' school. I'm not going to do that. Yes, you are, because if you don't, you're out of the film. What do you mean? I said, I love Steve Sanders and Donnie. They're two my close friends, they started the BKF. They're phenomenal martial artists. I said, I want them in the movie. And I said, so they're going to be in the movie. And if you're going to be in the movie, you're going to play that scene. Oh, okay. So he did. Okay. And it kind of eased their tension, but I don't think any of the three liked it. But anyway.
Let me ask you this. You brought up this about your ability to work with Bruce. And I'm guessing anybody else that you would, I mean, if you did a scene with Chuck Norris or anybody else, your ability to react and be able to take a shot from these guys, especially in the case, a full shot that, I mean, these things are crushing. There's no way you can fake that. On the other hand, you'll be able to take it. Did you ever strike him and never pull it?
Yes. In fact, when the scene, he got his hand cut and he's standing, with his right leg forward. I'm standing with my left leg forward. And we had not rehearsed the scene. We worked together for 10 and a half years. So he just said, Bob, so I want you, when you break the bottle, if you're looking into the dragon where I break the bottle, when I first break it, it's this long. Next time you see me stabbing at him, it's short. Why? Bottles don't break the same way. And we did that scene several times. And I still have my original gi. It's cut to shreds. I had to fall in the glass. I couldn't look around and say, oh, I can't fall here. I can't fall there. I just had to fall. So Bruce, instruction to me, Bob. Now, a real fighter, use your forward hand, your forward foot, whether it's left or right, doesn't matter. Whatever weapon I have closest to you, that's what I'm going to use on you. Okay. So he said, okay, film fighting, it's just the reverse. He said, when you break the bottles, your left hand, both hands will have bottles, broken bottles. But if you come at me with your left hand, it's too fast for the film. And you'll cut the shit out of me. So break the bottles and come at with your right hand, but I want you to try to stab my right pec with your right hand. As I mean, stab me. Why does it look so real? Because my character hated Bruce's character, and I'm trying to stab that SOB. Okay? So we do it 6 times perfect. Bruce is a perfectionist. Standing right leg forward, he throws a right crescent kick, and he hits between my wrist and my elbow. Okay? And when he comes in with a right crescent kick, he kicks it this way, the bottle flies. 7th time, each time I am hating him. My character hates his ass, and I want to kill him. I'm trying to stab him, so I'm getting faster every time. And the 7th time, it just got mistimed. And because I was just getting faster, Bruce kicked me behind the elbow. Therefore, the bottle didn't fly. All the scenes before, he hit me between the wrist and the elbow, bottle flew. He's got his right hand forward. He does a spinning back kick, bottle's gone, and then he side kicks me and kills me out of the scene. Well, the 7th time, because mistiming, he hit me behind the elbow because I was a little faster and he was a little slower. And we loved each other, but we were trying to do it for real. The bottle stayed there and he jammed his fist into it. His right foot, right hand, he jammed it right in the bottle because it hadn't been there before. So he cut his hand off for a week. Now, 2nd day, Freddie Weintraub comes to my room and he said, you got to get out of Hong Kong. I said, why? He said, well, rumor is Bruce is going to kill you. Well, first of all, I'm 6'1" and I'm 205 pounds. I walk around 90 pounds today, but 190. But I said, I'm a world professional champion and I've never lost a street fight in my life. And Bruce, 5'7", 150 pounds. I love him, but ain't no chance he's going to kill me. Bullshit. Let's go to his house. So again, I speak Cantonese. So we go over there, Freddie Weintraub and I, and Freddie says, hey, there's a rumor you're going to kill Bob. He said, bullshit. No way. He's my friend. I love him. And so we got on the phone. And again, I'm not fluent in Cantonese, but Geru Chana Ho Guai Peng Di, I can function. And so, yeah, you some say, Bacha. So he gets on the phone and everybody he talks to in Cantonese says, oh, where'd the rumor start? Well, Bob Klaus told me, the director. Oh, Bob Klaus told me. Oh, Bob Klaus told me. So about 6 times we get in the car and we go to the hotel. And Bob Klaus, the director, is staying in the same hotel I'm staying in. So we knock on the door, he answers the door, and I slap him right on top of his head. And I got freaky long arms. You got to be 6'6" to have arms like I do. I'm a monster, freaky. I slap him on the top of the head. He falls on the ground. I stand on his little hand, twist it back and forth. And I said, listen, you son of a bitch. This rumor better stop or you're going to be in the hospital and you won't be here for the finishing of the scenes. And you've already been banned from the fight scenes because you won't film them but 1 or 2 times, and Bruce wants 5 or 6. And then Bruce goes, yeah. And we left. No more rumor. Only 3 years later, when he wrote a book, when he was safe in Seattle, he said, and Bruce was going to kill Bob Wall, but he let him live because we needed him for the film. Right.
Yeah. Okay,
He was a punk.
let's talk about, so you've had, in the Way of the Dragon, you guys worked that out for a while. How many days did it take for you guys to actually film your scenes with Lee?
We never practiced our scenes. He just told me what he wanted. He told me what he wanted me to do, and he told me what he was going to do. We trained for over 10 years. So
I know, but I'm saying, Bob, was it a few hours? Was it a couple of days? You just kept on shooting the fight scenes until they found something comfortable, or just one take Willie?
No, it was one take Willie. I mean, we were so smooth together. We knew each other inside and out. I know how to take a punch and a kick. He knew how to throw one. It was just easy.
Okay.
The worst part
there's
was
some really great fight. There's some great exchanges in that. And I say that because it sort of set up the next movie, Enter the Dragon. And
it was like, when you have a wife, I've got a wife, 52 years, I'm totally in love with. And we're just, not that we don't disagree sometimes, but we're simpatico. We get each other. We have instincts. Bruce and I had instincts almost like a married couple. I knew what he wanted. He knew I could give it. He knew he could give it, and we did it. And so
you guys there was never a repeat. It seems to me that if you did something, you did it once and once only, and you did it very effective, setting up the neck. It was sort of like an escalation to the point where finally, when you got into the fight between Lee and O'Hara, at the end where it comes to the death kick and he steps on you, you could see the escalation. It was a built up of that. By the way, did you have any input on your facial makeup?
No, that was funny. That was all Freddie Weintraub. Without Freddie Weintraub, there'd be no Bruce Lee. He was this big, fabulous, he was chairman of the board of Warner Brothers. He did Woodstock, which saved Warner Brothers. He did Enter the Dragon, which saved Warner Brothers again. It's the second highest grossing martial arts film in Warner Brothers history. But Freddie loved Bruce. And being a Jewish man, he didn't like prejudice. He didn't like Hitler's. And so he knew that Bruce had it. He knew. I mean, he did so many famous guys from Tom Selleck up and down. He was a great person to spot talent. He knew Bruce had it. But Warner Brothers did not want Bruce Lee because he was Chinese, never been a leading man, okay? And so he insisted. So anyway, Bruce called me one day and when I had agreed to do it. He said, go to Warner Brothers and meet Freddie Weintraub. He was the chairman at the time. So I walk into his big office and he said, are you an actor? I said, nope. Taking acting? Nope. You want to be an actor? Nope. Well, thank you. You're not right for the part. Goodbye. So I walk out. I don't give a shit. I'm only there. But Bruce called me about an hour later, knowing he's the star, and he fought hard to get Into the Dragon. It was Hans Island, Three the Hard Way, and Blood this, and all that bullshit. So he said, you got the part right? I said, no, because I knew Bruce pretty well. I said, no, he said I was too short. Well, I'm 6'1". What does that make Bruce Lee at 5'7", a dwarf? That son of a bitch, you're gonna call back in 5 minutes. You're gonna be just right. 5 minutes later, Freddie calls me. And I mean, it was quick. And Bruce is in Hong Kong. And he said, Mr. Wall, can you grow a beard? Yeah, I got to shave twice a day. Okay, get a full beard and come in. So I go for 2 hours. Oh, it was funny because he said, well, we've reconsidered you. And I'm laughing. I know why you reconsidered me. The star insisted on me. So anyway, I'm in makeup for 2 days and I kept putting makeup on and walk in his office. Nope, not right. I walked back and I'd go to do more makeup and they'd wipe it off, put it on. Finally, they got this guy, Gary Morris, who was the best makeup artist at that time, who unfortunately passed away, but he was just great. And so he looked at all the pictures that had been done of my makeup for 2 days. And he said, I got it. And I mean, in 5 minutes, he goes, eek, 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 eek. No, it's not in the movie. They had to change the script for that. But anyway, as soon as I walked in with Freddie Weintraub with a beard and the scar, he went, perfect, you're in. So it was all.
Well, that's the thing that distinguished you. It's uniqueness. Like you're the antithesis of of the character of being the ultimate person that ends people's life. You're like, the creator of death for Han. You're the
It's a
one that
funny,
executes it, and you do it, and with great glee. I mean, the scene, you walk out there and you're looking, you tell Lee to come out and whatever. And then later on, he's not wearing a uniform. You take the board and you hit it and you break it right there. And I mean, that's a pretty impressive move.
we
And,
put that in
obviously
there.
the counter on that, his response was,
Right,
something Mr.
Bruce
Parker
and
used
I
to say.
put this in. Boards don't hit back. That was for demonstrators. We're fighters. We're not demonstrators. But it was just classic. The whole thing was classic because, back to, did we rehearse? Only one scene that we shot repeatedly. We had to rehearse when I do the jump spinning back kick and Bruce kicks me in the groin.
Yes.
Okay. Because nobody practices jump kick low.
No.
Jump kicks are always practiced high. So I got plenty of stills, and Bruce is 5'7", laying on his back. So how far could his little foot stick up? So I literally, I'm jumping 6-7 feet. I step a basketball.
Yeah.
And so I kept doing it lower and lower and lower. And finally, about the fourth or fifth scene, he's still a foot off my groin. And so I said, Bruce, and I've got stills of this too. I said, Bruce, I'm not going to have enough time. I'm going to stomp you in the face. I said, so let's agree. You roll to the right and I'm going to land to your left. He said, okay. Now I did it so low. Honestly, I was afraid I was going to stomp his foot. And then he kicked me in the balls. People always say, did you wear a cup? Obviously, you've never worn one. They work this way. They don't work this way.
Yeah,
no,
sure.
I didn't wear a cup. So anyway, we got the fifth or sixth time. One take, got it. Bam! And believe me, I didn't want to get kicked in the cooliones twice.
Yeah.
But other than that, there was no rehearsals. We shot everything one time. We were done.
Were there any stunt doubles for him?
No, wait, one time when he does the backflip, he couldn't do that. We had a stunt double for that, and I have stills of that.
Yeah. So somebody else actually did that.
Yeah, and sadly, I got an appointment in 10 minutes.
Okay.
I got to get out of here in 5 minutes.
So let's wrap it here. We can always pick up another time. You know what?
Anytime you want.
Well, I'll leave it with this. I really am grateful that you took the time to spend with us today to talk about all this. There's so much more to explore into the world of Bob Wall. Your contributions are immeasurable, and I am truly honored to know you. Thank you so much for having the time to spend with us. Is there anything you want to say in closing, Bob?
The honor goes two ways. You're a brilliant interviewer, and we had, luckily, great fans. I absolutely love Frank Trejo. He was one tough guy, and my heart is broken about the way he passed. Pretty brutal. What a great man. We showed what a man he was. Ed Parker, Mike Stone, all the people we've talked about, great people. It's been my honor and my pleasure. And anytime you can talk about great people and your admiration for them, which you and I have been giving, is a blessed day. Well, I can only say thank you. We can pick this up whenever you want.